Hi guys, today we're going to talk about how important it is to rest and be productive, but rest. So, fun fact, your brain has a window for being able to focus. It's called cortical arousal, and research shows that our brains have this peak window, which is usually within the first 4 hours of, waking up, where the ratio of excitatory to inhibitory neurotransmitters, which means active and inhibiting chemicals in the brain, they're perfectly balanced for deep work. So after that window of around 4 hours, your brain's cost of just like metabolic actions, they start to accumulate over time. So you're literally paying more energy, you can call it like a brain tax, for the same kind of result. So something might take much more brain power later on in the day just because your brain is more tired, there's more metabolic demands on the brain later on in the day than if you were to start a task or a project at the very start of the day when your brain is quite fresh. So this is actually one of the reasons why I really stopped the whole grind/hustle culture, and I don't really like it when, things like success and productivity are measured in these really absolute extreme ways of like hustling constantly and all that. When I was in secondary school, I really did feel like a hamster wheel sometimes. You literally, since you wake up, you're just like getting ready for school, you go to school, you come back. I mean, I finished school at like 4, and by the time you're kind of back, you eat your food, you change, whatever it is, it's almost 5. And I'd say like you'd have all this homework to do. I did anyway, because I did 8 different subjects in secondary school. And the homework piles up. And by the time you're doing your homework, it's dinner time. And then you might be able to, after dinner, finish more homework. But then it's time to sleep. And it's like, wow, all I've done is just schoolwork. So I realized for me, I needed a day that was 100% like academic free, and I kept it a Saturday because I mean, if I do it on Friday is still technically a working day and I'd go to school anyway, so I was like, okay, there's no point keeping Friday off. Then Sunday I'd probably be thinking about Monday, like realistically. So Saturday has been kind of like a religious thing for me to have my Saturdays off. I've been doing that since probably like 2019, which is 7 years now. It's worked pretty well for me. Even if I have an exam on Monday, I will take Saturday off and I work my planning and scheduling around that, because it's nice to just like reset your brain, rejuvenate a little bit, not have it work continuously for so long. And I think it's nice knowing that you have a day off that's just like literally what you want to do. You could be bed rotting the whole day, which is something that I tend to do a lot on my days off, is just like watch YouTube, watch Netflix, catch up on things, and take that time off for yourself, because you really do deserve that rest. I think when you have a complete day off, you're able to spend it with like zero academic thoughts. You're not thinking about your deadlines. You're not guilty of not working, and it makes me much more present actually, and ironically, a bit more productive for the rest of the week. So today I am sharing my exact routine on how to control and audit your time, because time is the most valuable thing that we have. So you know that feeling when, say, you've been studying for multiple hours and you've reached the point where you're just reading the same sentence over and over again. You're not really registering what you're reading. Biologically, that is due to something called glutamate. So earlier on in the episode, we spoke about, excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters, which are basically action-based and inhibitory-based chemicals in the brain. So glutamate is something that's quite excitatory. It excites the neurons. It makes them work. When you perform these high-demand cognitive tasks like studying, your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that's quite involved in cognition, will start to burn through a lot of energy. Understandably, because that's the part of your brain that's working quite a lot when you're studying something or learning something new. Now, a recent study found out that this intense activation of the prefrontal cortex over a long period of time causes glutamate, which again is the excitatory chemical in our brain, to start accumulating in that lateral prefrontal cortex. And now when glutamate starts to build up outside the neurons, it makes it difficult for that particular region to be activated again, because your brain has a threshold for how much glutamate it can allow in a particular area. So if, the prefrontal cortex is burning through all of this energy, it has so much glutamate accumulated, there's going to be a point when that threshold is going to be reached and your brain isn't going to allow more glutamate to accumulate. And that isn't your brain being lazy. It is just genuinely protecting itself physically from damage that can happen when glutamate starts to accumulate. The study showed that when glutamate does start to accumulate, people start choosing low effort, high reward options. Now, even when you do have free time, there is a tendency for us to waste it. Why? Because of something called decision fatigue. So by the time you finish your 4-hour deep work block, your brain has used up so much energy for trying to make all these choices. So that's why you sit on your couch afterwards, you just scroll for 2 hours. Not because you really want to watch TikToks necessarily. I think there's a point where we're all aware that we're just doom scrolling, but it's because you're kind of short circuiting to the most easiest thing to do at that point of time. And sometimes you can't even decide if that's like, do I watch Netflix, do I read a book, or do I go on a walk, you know? So to combat this, I have a literal random wheel generator that is basically on my laptop with a combination of things that I actually enjoy doing in my free time. So it can be Netflix, it can be YouTube. I also have Wordle on there, connections, crosswords. I have catching up on my WhatsApp messages or Instagram messages. It's fun because in a way it's spontaneous because the wheel tells me what to do if I have like free time available. So the rule that I have for this is that whatever the wheel says is final. So there's no excuses. And I think I've trained my brain in the way that like, if the wheel does happen to spin on something that's slightly more academic related or more just like quote unquote work, I do it because I know the next time that I spin it, it might land on a Netflix show. And that's my way of like sprinkling in a bit of fun into what I'm doing. And it does take the brain power out of decision making because so many times we can just be like paralyzed by making decisions, and it conserves that energy for things that actually matter later on. So yeah, I think it's really spontaneous, it's fun, and it's how I stop myself from just like defaulting to, you know, TikTok or Instagram and like aimlessly scrolling. I default to the random wheel generator and then that tells me what to do, which is quite nice. And I highly recommend, if you guys haven't checked it out, like genuinely, it might change your life. I've been religiously using it for a while and it's just, I love it so much. Now, I think through this episode, you know, we're talking a lot about how time is the most valuable asset that we have. And during the weekend, I do the weekend reset. It's quite a non-negotiable for me. So here is what I do step by step. I go through my notes and my gallery because a lot of the times I might write down like, you know, a thought I have or something I need to check out on my notes app, or screenshots that I might have taken up to remind me of something. And then I go into my gallery and kind of clear up the week's photos in case I've taken like multiple, and I can just clear up my gallery that way. So it's kind of like clearing up space, which is quite nice. Now, I think I've mentioned this to quite a few people that I have a Notion list of, I think, over 300 things that I want to try out within, you know, the city that I'm in. And it could be going to check out a pub, it could be going to a certain university society, it could be, you know, going on a hike, whatever it is, like things that I have found really interesting and put that on the list. And it's all in alphabetical order, so it makes it like look quite nice. I also have some suggestions from like my TikToks that people have shared, and I choose these things randomly. And I guess everyone has their way of like choosing it. You could do like eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I personally just count down like whatever date it is. So I just count down like those many things. For example, today's the 16th. I will count down 16 things. And the 16th item will be the one that I try out. So, for example, last week I went to a pub quiz and we actually ended up winning, which was pretty cool. I think it's just really nice to have these things to try out that you may not usually do, just to push yourself into new situations and, you know, out of your comfort zone. I do my best to do like one new thing a day because at the beginning of the term especially, you do have the time and space to do so. I think when, you know, assignments come in, things like that, I try to do still at least one new thing from that list during the week that I might have like assignment submissions, but it just keeps life fun. So I really, really recommend making a fun list for your city. It could be literally trying out a cafe, it could be going to a park that's in your neighborhood that you haven't had the chance to check out, and make it this fun, spontaneous thing to explore and discover new parts of your city and have new experiences. I also do this thing where I pick a new recipe from a cookbook that I have that I want to try out that week, away from my desk and into, you know, a more creative space. I really do enjoy cooking. I think it's quite therapeutic. And I also do tend to get like the bulk of my tasks done in the first, you know, 4 hours-ish of the day. I have a checklist on my Notion page for what due date is the most recent, and then I do it immediately. So this tends to keep me at least like a week or two ahead of schedule, which is quite nice. And it can like kind of factor in for any blips on the way that might make certain tasks take a bit longer. And then, yeah, I have my Google Calendar and I plot in, you know, all the fun activities for the week, the recipe that I want to try out, and like I get my groceries according to that. I put in, you know, what I hope is like my work hours, my quote unquote complex tasks that require like more brain power at the very start of the day. And then towards the end, it's more just like passive work or things that I don't require as much to do. So I do recommend having a nice visualization of your time because you can see exactly where your time is going, and then you can kind of move tasks around so that they flow better, things like that. I do personally really enjoy my weekend planning sessions because I can see the upcoming week and it brings me a lot of joy and excitement being like, oh, it's going to be a fun week. It's going to be new. I'm going to try this. So yeah, I highly recommend. Now, finally, let's talk about the default mode network, which is basically the night shift of your brain. So when you are doing nothing, your brain switches to the default mode network. And this network does handle creativity, self-reflection, problem solving. So if you never really just stop for a second and like be reflective, your default mode network is never going to get the time to be able to process your emotions in your life. So for me personally, I have this thing that's quite a non-negotiable in my evening routine. That's like my 9 p.m. wrap-up time. I have an alarm on my phone that goes off at 9 o'clock. That is kind of an indication to me that, okay, whatever I'm doing, it's time to wrap up. I'm going to start getting ready for bed. Now, even if I don't sleep until midnight, I'll try my best to stop working at 9 or half 9 because I like to journal, I like to read, I like to watch Netflix. I like to give that time to my default mode network to process the day, connect the dots, see how we did. So I do recommend like having at least half an hour to 1 hour at the end of each day, just purely for yourself. I know journaling has come up quite a few times in various episodes across the podcast, but genuinely, if you haven't given journaling a go, like highly, highly recommend. It's just so nice to be able to do that at the end of a long day and process your emotions and see them on paper. Now, in my family and my friends know this, that like I have regular alarms on my phone, partially because I want to combat, a sedentary lifestyle, because I have read that it's important to get up and move every 2 hours. I have alarms for kind of various things, but they do help me get up and move. So I have one at 12 noon because I don't want to like start getting really hungry and be like, oh, I have to wait for me to cook. So I usually tend to eat around like, half 12, 1. So I get up at 12 and start making my recipe. So I know that that's kind of like my designated lunchtime that I can put on my calendar. I have 3 p.m., which is more of like a snack time vibe. So even if I'm not getting anything, it could be like a cup of tea or whatever, but getting up, moving just out of my seat, which is quite nice. And then I have a 5 p.m. alarm to, again, just kind of get into the kitchen and start cooking dinner, which I know some people are going to be like, that's so early. Yeah, I do tend to eat quite early. I eat around like half 5, 6. So I think 5 p.m. is a nice time to kind of round that up. Also because, there is like this factor of, preparing your meal and then washing the dishes afterwards and stuff like that. Like I do like to allocate an hour for my eating times for that reason. I do this thing also that I schedule in on my calendars monthly catch up with my friends. So, if they wanted to, they would. And I guess I want to. So I do put it in the calendar. If I've, met up with a friend, I will automatically put it in my calendar like from 1 month from the day that I met them, that I'm going to, text them again and be like, hey, let's hang out, whatever it is. So that way I think I'm pretty good and consistent with maintaining my contacts, even if it's long distance, like having a call, having a game night, it's quite nice. So yeah, I think all of that to say, just like work smart, not hard. Enjoy your life, find your non-negotiables. We really can make the time. You just kind of have to see and know where your time is going. And that's where I think a visual calendar is so, so helpful. I have also started this thing because I love watching movies. I didn't really make the time last semester to indulge in movies that much. So this semester, I've done this really fun thing for myself where every Friday evening, finish early, put on a face mask, get ready, and then we're going to watch a Netflix movie. But it's just so fun because I feel like I'm entering this new movie world every Friday, and it makes me just feel so happy. So I think identify something that you can do that might take more time otherwise, but you can put it on a Friday evening, a Saturday, Sunday, whatever, and take that time, whether it's, painting, whether it's playing a particular game. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I hope it was helpful. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.